What's up, T-Tam fam? Good morning. It's Sunday, November 23rd, 2025, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Here it is, episode 20, The Truth About Me. I'm Eric, and today we're going to talk about, first off, it's been a wild week. I hope you guys enjoyed the special episode that occurred on Friday. That one really kind of, hit home for me. And, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I do recommend it. Kind of gives you a big insight on what I've been doing for quite some time. And primarily, though, the last 4 weeks since the breakup since the breakup occurred. But today, what we have is it's a part of my it's a part of the growth, which is the power of stillness, right? There's a version of me now that doesn't rush, doesn't react, doesn't get pulled by storms I didn't create. That version came from stillness, not chaos. So let me kind of introduce a concept, is that stillness is not the absence of movement. Stillness is the presence of clarity, right? And what that means is that beforehand in my younger years, I was a little on the anxious side, I'll admit that. And when I didn't receive a phone call, or I didn't receive a text, or reaching out because I genuinely care, that would kind of send me, and I didn't know how to sit with it. And this is one thing that I am grateful for with this relationship, is that through multiple periods, I've had to sit in stillness. I've had to sit in the darkness. I've had to sit in discomfort. And, facing those head on, has drastically improved on how I look at not only personal situations, but professional situations as well. So this is applicable throughout your day-to-day. You just have to be willing to understand why, get to the root of it, and find a resolution. Now, for me, vlogging, this podcast here, this has helped me tremendously. Also journaling, writing stuff down. I still do that. Also, my spiritual side is, I'm still not a full believer, right? So, but I can see that what I'm doing, and how I'm doing it is, it's netting me results that I'm looking for. So, just to kind of go back on how I used to handle life, my old self versus my new self. Old self would be reacting fast, like to any sort of situation. Again, I'm a fixer by nature. I'm a nurturer. If I see a problem, I want to solve it. Like, that's just how I am. And, it took me to this place of I can fix anybody. Truth is, I can't. And that became very apparent in this last relationship, because after a lot of self-reflection and speaking, is that no matter what I did, the relationship was doomed. It wasn't going to go any further than where it went. So, kind of taking that into consideration, right? Is my old self would kind of spiral and go through a variety of scenarios, and didn't know whether I was coming or going. And this, it's, trying to stabilize people who are unstable. Again, I looked at it as a challenge, because I had that much to give, right? And I think that was, one of the things that I've learned is, even though I have that ability to be somebody's calm, be somebody's peace, it in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't happen that way. That's what I'm thinking, right? It's not what they're thinking. So, and when I would try to fix any sort of situation, it, sometimes it would work, Excuse me, it was like a band-aid, right? It would work for so long, and then ultimately the band-aid would come off, and then you have to put another one on, and another one, and band-aids keep coming off, keep getting put on, so on and so forth. So it's when you're doing that and you're getting results, you think you're actually doing something good, when in fact, when it comes to fixing people, you can't fix them. They can only fix themselves. Um, because to kind of elaborate on that is, like, oh well, I'm fixing them. It's creating that motion. Therefore, motion creates progress, right? No, not necessarily. I was always moving, but I wasn't always growing in my younger years because I didn't fully understand. I didn't grasp certain concepts of what it was. It was me just kind of having the blinders on and going. And once I felt that it was, resolved, whether I heard it verbally or, from my partner or whatnot, like that was my answer. But in reality is, being able to kind of take a step back and looking at yourself internally and how you handle things, process things. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people are afraid to see their true selves. Um, but it is pertinent. You have to know what makes you as a person tick. And you have to be able to bring that sense of calm, sense of peace into yourself. And once you do that, everything kind of slows down. And it slows down in a good way because it's going to allow you to understand things more clearly. When you kind of take a step back and really kind of think things through, you don't react as fast. Um, and it's something where you listen more. And the more you listen, the more you understand. The more you understand, the better off that you are. Because there's going to be plenty of instances where you're going to come across in a relationship that you're going to do absolutely everything. And your everything still isn't going to be good enough. Because in the end, you cannot control what your partner is going to say or going to do. That is a choice that they make willingly. Whether it's right or wrong in your eyes it's subjective. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter because that's the decision that they made. Kind of realizing that I needed the stillness happened, speaking from this relationship, happened over the summer. And this was kind of, this was kind of, tough because it, ultimately it started with social media, right? As she ended up deactivating her social media, and I thought she had blocked me. And from my divorce, my ex-wife, blocked me on all social medias, so I couldn't see anything. And for some reason, that sent me. And I don't know why, because personally, I don't care about social media, but I think because I cared so deeply in this relationship that, I saw that and I immediately just was just like, what's going on? So from that moment, I hit the brakes. I sat back, and that's when I really started to do a lot of inner work on myself by looking at what things what things set me off, what things made me calm. There was certain things that I was, excuse me, there's certain things that I happened to be going through, emotionally, and I had to get a hold of my emotions and truthfully it wasn't as bad as I thought, but still, it was just like, why? Because this relationship challenged me to be more emotional. It was something we discussed. It was something that I had told her. I said, listen, I am not an emotional person. I don't talk about feelings. I don't talk about this. I don't talk about that. But I made it a point that within this relationship that I would talk about that. And I think that kind of awoken more than I thought possible. So, and then after, our breakup 4 weeks ago, it was, really kind of just sitting with everything, and just kind of going over everything, to a point where I'm not gonna lie, I looked at my side, I looked at her side, and again, like being able to kind of walk away from this was not an easy decision, you know. I was getting ready to, propose and, create a life, and then all of a sudden it's, one little thing got set off, and you know, and that was really kind of the end of that, because emotionally she couldn't take any more. She was at her capacity for emotions. And I was trying to carry them both. Honestly, I was trying to carry her emotion, I was trying to carry mine, just because like that's just who I am, and what I try to do is like I will put the world on my back for the person that I love, and I will hold that for as long as I have to, because I thought it was the right thing to do. When in fact, it, again, it, is a part of the reason it caused me to kind of lose myself in this relationship, um, and get rid of, certain things, simply because I didn't want it to be problematic later on, but, because I was 100% all in with this relationship. So again, those were my choices. That was something I actively did because of how much I cared for her. So after the breakup, and dealing with the stillness, is life got quiet again, and instead of fearing the silence, I finally listened, and again, it was reading, it was, watching a lot of videos, taking it with a grain of salt, of course. Basically, kind of how I do things is I'll listen to just about anything, yeah, on specific topics, and kind of grab bits and pieces to see how true or not true that it is, and really kind of see how it applies to my how it applies to a relationship, how it applies applies to my day to day. And I've learned quite a bit from that. And throughout this whole process, even though it was devastating and something that I didn't want to happen, it happened. And just like anything, and kind of my motto is you get knocked down nine, you get up, 9 times, you get up 10, right? And life doesn't stop. It doesn't matter what you're going through, whether it's good or bad. Life isn't going to stop. It just continues to go, and that's why I've always continued to move forward in life, regardless of what's thrown at me. But I will say is in this stillness, I was able to gain clarity. I was able to stay grounded. I was able to stay calm. And I think, you really have to kind of believe in yourself, that you're capable of doing much more than you think you are. And just like anything is, God had a plan, and he took the relationship as long as he saw fit, which was almost 2 years, and that was that. But what I've gained through this is to be able to sit in the stillness, and be able to sit in the discomfort, and know that, I've grown, I've evolved, and I'm evolving. Like I've, found a good routine of stuff that, allows me to move forward. So let's kind of go over what stillness looks like, and I did touch up on it again. So this is how I'm able to move forward. Is again, I vlog, I journal, and that's kind of the big thing. I actually really look forward to these episodes every single week. It gives me something to strive for, and I try to be better at it. And I think I'm getting better. I mean, you let me know, right? But the gym is major. I'm telling you, it's my original church. Any sort of gym therapy, whether it's cardio or barbell, just get out and take care of yourself. You'll be amazed at how much clearer your mind is, and how much clearer you're thinking, and how you're feeding yourself and fueling your body. That all comes into play. There's a lot of people, like I'll tell you, back when I was getting in trouble, and you know being becoming sober, rather. It was I was eating 2 pints of Ben and Jerry's ice cream a day, right? That's not good. So with this is, having good meals, home cooked meals that you make yourself, and that can be therapeutic too. Cooking can be very therapeutic. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Like I go out to the store and buy everything, and I kind of cook it up all in one night, and then I meal prep, right? So it's just grab and go. Don't have to worry about it. But that's something that I urge you to get into, and it doesn't have to be like high intensity. Just get to the gym. Do a yoga class, do a spin class, do a Peloton class, do a bar class, a Pilates, whatever. Or just go to the gym, go to a CrossFit, whatever blows your hair back, right? That's what I want you to do. The power of prayer, again, like I said, not fully committed, but there have been some things where I enjoy, like I say, and see how it goes. Now, again, I'm feeling the good vibes around myself lately, which is, excellent. I don't have that quote unquote black cloud over my head that I used to feel. So, because of, me going to church, which I will be doing later on today, it's really kind of, it's subconsciously helping me through this. I sit by I go down and, at least once a week to sit by the water, you know, go sit there, music off. So sometimes I'll be watching, listening to a podcast or listening to a video, or just staring off into the ocean, because that, for me, is a calming feeling. It's nice. Now, whether or not I get out of my truck or I sit in my truck, it doesn't matter, but I kind of enjoy that time. Any sort of stressful situation that comes up is pausing. Instead of being reactive, right, where it's like you hear one thing and then bang, you snap right back at it. Mm-mm. So to me is, if somebody comes at me defensively over something, is I don't react. I think. And what I'm thinking is do I understand why? That's the first question. Do I understand why this person is upset with me? If it's a yes, then I will give my answer. If it's a no, I will then try and find out more information. And being able to do that, taking that, few seconds in between, deep breath, calming yourself, grounding yourself, and answering with, that calm reserve about you, changes things. Because now you're kind of taking the emotions out of it, And that's one of the big things is a lot of people speak with emotions. A lot of people go, they're emotional people, right? And that's kind of how they operate. So, keep that in mind. Pause before you react. Another thing is I stopped chasing, right? Is because I was, I would see a problem, and this occurred in this relationship. I would see a problem, and I would immediately want to fix it. And truth be told, it wasn't going to get fixed, no matter what I did, no matter what I said. So I stopped chasing, and I accepted. And acceptance is powerful because when you accept an answer that somebody willingly gives you now, they could be telling the truth or they could be playing games, it doesn't matter. But you always take somebody for their word, on their word when they say something, simply because um, they said it in that particular moment. And acceptance is major because it allows you to sit there and say, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to chase you. If you don't want to be in this relationship, I'm not going to force you to be in this relationship. Moving on, right? And it hurts, but again, it's a self-respect thing too. You have to know your worth, and you have to know what you're about. And by not chasing, like the right person, you're not going to have to chase, essentially, right? The right person, when you meet them, they're going to come into your lives and they're going to make things. They're going to make things everything better. You're going to have a healthy communication style. You're gonna, you're gonna have people that want to find resolutions together, not individually, um, and that takes time. So again, it's keeping your self-respect intact. Um, again, taking emotion out, like not responding emotionally. So that's why I pause, you know, before I give a reaction because I want to take the emotion out of it. I don't want I don't want it to be an emotionally driven conversation because that's when stuff starts to go sideways because you're not speaking rationally. It's that simple. Is when you speak in emotion, you're not speaking rationally. You're speaking in that particular moment. Like that's how you feel in that moment. Is it true? Some, yeah, I'm not going to deny it, but most, no, not at all. Because it's a kind of a front, if you ask me, of because they're not able to articulate the actual truth is what's bothering them. It's my opinion. Um, again, it's facing whatever discomfort that you're seeing head on. Don't run from it. You're not going to you're not going to gain anything by running because that problem will eventually, or that issue, I should say, will still be there, and you'll get out of it for the moment, but it will circle around, come back after you, and it'll catch you. Here's a quote that I happen to come up with. Stillness is where honesty finally catches up to you. Again, what I just said. You know, um, if you run from something, it'll catch up to you. But in stillness, you know, honesty is is the way to go. And there's nothing better than be honest with yourself and be honest with your partner. Seriously, whether they like it or not, you know, at least that you are telling, the truth, the God's honest truth of what you're feeling, how you're doing, where you're at, so on and so forth, how they're making you feel, XO, you know. I don't know why I just did the XOXO, no hugs and kisses there. But now we're kind of into like what stillness taught me about myself. And peace is a skill, right? It's not a feeling, it's not luck, it's a choice you make repeatedly. So if you constantly want to, take this as lesson one, you know, is find your peace. It's that simple. And it's something that you have to choose every single time. Choose your peace. Lesson number two, not everything needs your response. And I learned this in this past relationship because I was an over-explainer. I would, I would talk when I shouldn't have talked. I would, sometimes I got it right and other times I didn't. But, again, it's all, a learning experience. Sometimes silence is the answer. Not saying anything, just being present for your partner makes a world of difference. Letting them vent. Sometimes distance is protection. I am not a fan of that. Like long distances, I should say, or for long periods. Like I do believe everybody needs their space, and I'm happy to give that, but under a certain time frame. And also letting go is sometimes the win. Even though you may love that person, you have to let them go because at that particular moment, that relationship is causing you too much rather than, it's causing you too much of a headache or too much grief. That's not good. That's not a good relationship. And one of the things why I had to say goodbye was because the constant of moving of the goalposts, changing all the time, not being fully transparent, you know, um, and why I can deal with pretty much anything for any length of period of time. But to me, it comes back to reciprocity. And, I don't ask for reciprocity and everything, but when it comes to emotions and stuff like that, like, yeah, that's big because I want to know about my partner and I want them to know about me, right? Because we are not mind readers. Lesson four is more of a spiritual look. God speaks in stillness. Again, where I'm not fully believe, but I feel that my consistency in going to church has strengthened um, because it's teaching me to hear and not talk, right? And listen and not talk. Of course, if I have questions, I have something to reference, but kind of take that as believe, reading the Bible, hearing scripture, hearing a service, it's forcing you to listen and truly understand what they're talking about. And lesson five, stillness is where your identity returned, right? Without noise, you met yourself again. And that's really what it is. Um, when it ultimately comes down to it is just being able to meet yourself again is what makes you happy. And um, you kind of have to have that as a preface, and that's one thing you have to put on the forefront. um, so this last part's a little bit different. Like it's more of how I'm showing up differently now, which means less reactive, less intense, more intentional, more observant, more selective, more rooted, more aligned, and building my spirituality, right? Um, and with those, it's tough because if you've been constantly surrounded by chaos and drama, that's all that you know. And you know what? It's okay. But you also have to understand is that, you know, it's okay for a period. It's okay for a certain period of time until it starts making your relationship detrimental, and that's kind of the cause of it. And you're going to have to do a lot of inner work and understand that it's not going to be done in a day. Like, this is stuff that takes weeks, months, years to kind of overcome, but you can do it. Um, when you find stillness, you stop confusing chaos for chemistry, right? Think about that. Again, I was touching about the chaos, and because you grew up in it, and you were surrounded by it, you think, oh yeah, everything's fine. But in reality, we all grow up differently, um, different paths, different parents and all of that, or no parents if you came from foster home or whatnot. Like, you had to learn it for yourself, or you saw it from friends. So you have a lot of influences in your life, but chaos is not chemistry. And as this episode comes to a close, I want to thank you guys again for watching this video. I hope you definitely check out Friday's video. But today is really kind of a day of reflection. Just like every day, it's all about reflecting upon your day, your week, your month, your year, and that's something that when you do that routinely, you'll be able to see what your progression levels are, and that's where I hope you guys get to. Stillness showed me who I am and who I'm not meant to be anymore. And I'm grateful for that, because it's shown me a new way that I can approach life. And I'm all about that, truthfully. It has taught me that peace is the prerequisite for purpose. Without that, it's going to be difficult, not going to lie. So you have to find your peace. And I'm going to end this with a call to reflection. When was the last time you sat still long enough to hear yourself? Think about it. Let me know in the comments. And with that, this ends today's episode 20. Again, I appreciate you all for tuning in. Get ready for next one coming up November 30th. It'll be after Thanksgiving. We got Thanksgiving coming up. And what is it coming up on Thursday? Wow, I almost said Sunday, but Thursday. And it's a time for being with family, enjoying yourself and being thankful for what you're able to bring to yourself and to your family and to your significant others. So I really hope you take this time to enjoy yourself, enjoy the food, enjoy the company, truthfully, because Thanksgiving is, it's a start of the three-headed monsters, I call it. We've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and this is one of three. So, anyways, again, thank you all for tuning in. Catch you next time. Take care.